emergency has been declared in Georgia after a surge of violence in Atlanta. The Republican governor there, Brian Kemp, called in the National Guard to keep the peace in the capital city, Ainsley.
Yeah, because at least 30 people shot over the holiday weekend there. 5 people were killed, including that 8-year-old little girl we told you about yesterday. Governor Kemp slamming the violence in the city.
All right, so the governor saying in a quote, here we go, peaceful protests were hijacked by criminals with a dangerous, destructive agenda. We see that in New York. Now innocent Georgians are being targeted, shot and killed and left for dead. This lawlessness must be stopped and order restored in our capital city. And let's bring in Georgia Congressman Doug Collins, member of the House Judiciary Committee and U.S. Senate candidate. Congressman, I imagine you support this. It's kind of a relief to see a Democratic mayor and Republican governor seemingly on the same page. Do you think this will work?
I think it will, Brian. I'm glad to see that the governor has brought out the National Guard. It's been something we need to see done. We need to give support to our local police down there, and I think the governor has done the right thing here. I applaud his actions. I would hope also that as we look at this, he will continue on and join what I've called one of the reasons that actually started this was the DA in Fulton County, Paul Howard, actually charging officers before the investigations were finished, which caused the Atlanta Police Department to not believe anybody has their back. They've had to disengage. So hopefully this will be a time, I hope the governor will help call on him to step aside so we can get an independent prosecutor there, because what we need is the Atlanta Police Department to be able to do their job and be able to clean out these areas without having to fear someone not having their back from higher up. So I'm glad to see this is happening, and we'll see what goes from here.
Yeah, and in fact, you've been calling for that investigation for a number of weeks. It will be interesting. But at the same time, Congressman, you know that Wendy's, which is the location where Rayshard Brooks was killed in that police-involved shooting a couple of weeks ago, that has become essentially the center of the protests in Atlanta. And for the longest time, the police were told to back off, and the mayor allowed the protesters to take over the burned-out Wendy's location, and they have been putting up the temporary blockades, and that is the reason that little 8-year-old girl, Sequoia Turner, and her family made a turn into a parking lot up against that barricade where people were walking around with long guns, and people opened fire on that car. I mean, where was the rule of law for that family just a couple of days ago?
Well, that's the great question here. I mean, look, anywhere where you allow lawlessness to exist in a city, whether it be Seattle, what we saw there, or down in this area in Atlanta, when the police are told to disengage, when the mayor's office seemingly was just letting it happen, what we've got to understand is lawlessness and rule of law, when not allowed, when allowed to fester and not be contained, is going to cause more and more problems. And unfortunately, what we have seen, and we saw it in Seattle, now we've seen it in Atlanta. Why does it take a death? Why does it take a death in these communities of someone being shot to know that when you have lawlessness areas and you just assume that everything's going to be okay? It just is sad, because these minority communities, the communities that are hardest hit right now, are the ones that blow the brunt of this. Why are we doing this? We need to stop it now. That's why the governor, I think, brought in the National Guard. We've not only seen it in this area around the Wendy's, we saw them attack the Georgia State Patrol headquarters. We've seen them all over. Yeah. This is the thing that has to happen, because it shouldn't take a tragic death for somebody to all of a sudden say, wow, we need to enforce the law.
Yes, so many are saying that we need to defund police departments. I know you have said no to defunding. We need to defend. You have that 11-year-old little boy that was shot and killed in D.C., and his grandfather said, we need police. Crime is going to get worse. You start having less police officers. Who is going to come when there is a need for police services? Your own father was a police officer. Tell us about him and why our law enforcement teams are so important.
Well, the law enforcement teams are there to protect not only lives and property, they're there to encourage our communities, to have the civil discourse, to have the community bonding that we know that we can go out and be safe. We know we can go anywhere in our cities and know that the rule of law is being enforced. And when you talk about defunding the police or cutting back on the police, then simply what you're telling those police officers who put their lives on the line for us every day is, we don't value you. So any of these departments, any of these city councils, any place that say, we're going to take money, we're saying, we don't value you. You can always give money to mental health, and we need those places, and addiction centers. We need those places, but you cannot go away from our police officers, because by saying that you're wanting to defund them, no matter what your reasoning is, you're telling them they don't matter.
Congressman, the mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, was on CNN yesterday and said it's a perfect storm, pointing to President Trump, saying his lack of leadership is stirring emotions which are playing out as violence in our streets. Comes back to President Trump?
No, it's coming back to Mayor Bottoms when she was not forceful in saying, let's make sure that there is no zones where the rule of law is not enforced. We're encouraging and making sure that the Atlanta Police Department felt like they didn't have her support or back. It's not simply giving them raises. It's not simply, saying that you support them. It's actually being there when they need it, and that's when they need to do their job, and knowing that if they do their job, they're going to get justice just like everyone else demands for the others that they're actually enforcing.
Are the Atlanta cops standing down right now?
No, I think they're doing their job as best they can, but they're very discouraged. They're very disheartened by what is happening here because of the mixed signals being brought from not only the administration, but also, again, it goes back to the fact that when they do their job, if they cannot get a proper investigation but get charged with felony murder, this is a problem, and that's why I'm calling on the governor and others. They've got to get this where the officers get this DA out of the way, get a proper investigation so the Atlanta Police Department are equipped. We've had over 50 officers I know of right now who are applying outside of Fulton County because they don't trust being a cop in Fulton County.
That's going the wrong way. A moment ago, I saw on our air a very young Doug Collins with his father. Can you tell us a little bit about your dad, the state trooper?
My dad was a state trooper for 30-something years. He started in the early 60s. He went through the 90s. I mean, he saw a lot of things. He saw the civil rights unrest. He's been a part of, having to go to civil unrest for his career. Dad was always one who went out there and tried to treat people with respect. He was firm, and knowing that growing up in the household. But also, I watched the other side. And what I'd love for all the folks to know is officers come home, they cry when they see about things that they've seen on the job. It takes them out. I remember when my dad would come home and just be really quiet. I knew something happened at work. Yeah. And also I knew it when an officer did something wrong, you could tell because Dad was furious because he knew that people would judge him by what others did as well. And so officers have a whole package, and their families need to be lifted up in prayer as well.
Well, I know you're proud of him, and I know he's proud of you. He was in law enforcement. You were a pastor, and now you're a congressman. All three
maybe a senator.
Right, that's true.
That's what we're working on.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Great to be with you. Y'all take care. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.